Everyone, today Jesus gets in trouble for not following the rules. Jesus went through the wheat fields on the Sabbath. As the disciples made their way, they were picking heads of grain. The Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they breaking the Sabbath law?" He said to them, "Haven't you read what David did when he was in need and he and those with him were hungry? During the time of Abiathar, the high priest, David went into God's house and ate the bread of the presence, which only the priests were allowed to eat. And he also gave bread to those who were with him." And then he said, "The Sabbath was created for humans. Humans weren't created for the Sabbath. This is why the human one is Lord even over the Sabbath." So you read the Old Testament, harvesting is not allowed on the Sabbath. And you could argue that what the disciples are doing here, picking heads of grain to eat, counts as harvesting, right? And so it breaks that biblical commandment. What counts as work, right? That was a big discussion during this time in Judaism. And it was coming from a good place, from a desire to follow God's command, to rest on the Sabbath. You know, I think it's interesting that Christians very often will mock these Jewish rabbis for having such precise instructions about when you could work and what counts as work. And then at the same time, those same people will then go and nitpick and argue about how to precisely follow New Testament commands, as if it's a new law, which it is not. The important thing in this is that Jesus doesn't get involved in that. Jesus doesn't debate whether or not they're actually working or whether or not he's actually breaking the command. He kind of just assumes they are. Right? He doesn't look for a loophole to explain, well, here's why we're not actually breaking the law, because that's what legalism does. And he does tell a biblical story, but it's not about justifying breaking the rules. It's to make a statement about what rules are actually meant to do. Now, it's true that we do need boundaries and structure and guidelines, right? If there were no lines on the highway, it probably would be a lot more dangerous to drive on it. But Jesus reminds us that rules are there, structures are there to help us grow, not to restrict growth. Right? God didn't make a command, whether about the Sabbath or about anything else. He didn't make the command first and then create us so that we could follow this great rule that God made up. God created humans. And in this case, God knows that we need rest, right? That's something we often forget. And so that's why God made a command about resting on the Sabbath. So how do we look at rules? Do we think about them just for their own sake? Or do we think about how there's a greater human-centered purpose like Jesus describes here? Let's not make God's gift into a curse. Trust that when God says, hey, you should probably do this and not do that, trust that God is trying to give us life. And honestly reflect on the way that we carry that out, whether that makes that life a reality.